Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into genealogy and what were some of the areas that your ancestors were in, or how what was there? Did some of them come to Southern Colorado, and what have you
Yes.
learned?
I guess I think I got a, the bug for genealogy kind of from my mom.
Hmm.
Uh, I remember when I was probably about probably 8, 10 years old. My mom kept an old antique suitcase down in our basement,
Wow.
full of old pictures
Wow.
and stuff like that.
What a dream.
And yeah, and I don't know what it was. Once a year, we would go downstairs. We would bring the suitcase up to the kitchen table, and me and my mom and some of my brothers and sisters would just go through the pictures, and she'd tell us who was who and this and that. And yeah, it was a blessing to have all these old photos.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, I look forward to that every year. We to bring those up and talk to my mom about you know, the relatives, and I think that's probably what got me piqued my interest. And a lot of it comes from this is just my thinking, and this is an old. I don't know if this is a saying or a poem or what you call it, but I've come across this in genealogy circles. It says, "We are the chosen. In each family, there is one who seems to be called to find the ancestors, to put flesh on their bones and make them live again, to tell the family story and to feel that somehow they know and approve. Doing genealogy is not a cold gathering of facts, but instead breathing life into all who have gone before. We are the storytellers." I think I was, I think some of us were chosen. I can't explain my passion, but I just want my ancestors' history told. Our northern New Mexico, southern Colorado history is so rich. I hate to see it just swallowed up, and be gone. For my grandchildren, will never know the Hispanos, Manitos ever existed. So that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I've seen that poem or meme or whatever before as well,
Yeah,
and feel
yeah,
exactly the same way. But whatever, I seem even I was a very serious child, and I just sort of wonder, like, just if I was sort of born with all their stories in me, and
yeah,
now it just feels like my purpose is to tell their stories and to exactly bring them back to life. So that's
yeah,
part of why I started the podcast. So I totally understand. So, and I love that we can meet each other
yeah.
because, I'm sure you have that experience if you have family members that you try to share some of this info with, and oh my God, you'll never believe this thing that I found. And they're like,
Hmm.
oh, uh-huh, yeah, sure, that sounds interesting. They don't quite get it.
Yeah, and get back to we are the chosen ones. I've had some strange coincidences happen. This just happened this past summer, a few months ago. Uh, I do a big cleanup up in Red Wing in the Upper Huerfano
Hmm.
every year, and that's been going well. A lot of people show up, and we have a gathering, and we have a lunch and stuff like that. And the next day, my wife told me, "Well, let's go to Walsenburg to the old St. Mary's Cemetery and clean." She wanted to clean her family's graves. And just coincidence, my grandfather, who I never knew, passed away before I was born. He is buried right next to her family. How did that ever happen?
Oh my
You
gosh.
know,
And you didn't know that before?
before me and my wife were married, we never knew that, but we started,
Hmm.
going to clean her graves. I said, "Gee, here's my grandpa George, and buried right next to your parents." And beyond that coincidence, getting back to this summer, as we pulled into the cemetery there in Walsburg, the old South St. Mary's, we saw a couple just wandering around looking. I could tell they were trying to find a grave, and they were about to leave, and they came up on us. We're looking for geez, I don't remember the lady's name, but she was an Espinoza, and we just looked over. She's right here. She was right next to in the same area where my grandfather and my wife's parents were, and just like stuff like coincidences like that just have happened to me. Stuff, who would have thought they?
We've had the same
Yeah.
experience. Whenever we take, a genealogy trip or something like that, things just sort of fall into place and
Yes,
we meet the right people. And so we just assume that the ancestors are kind of cheering us on and helping us out a little bit.
that's what I'm talking about. Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So how did your family end up in, because it's really was kind of rare. 3 out of 4 of my lines ended up in Southern Colorado as well. So how did your family kind of move from New Mexico up into, did they take like the San Luis Valley? Do you know how they got there, why, or they decided to move
Well,
up there? Of
yeah. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the genealogist Patricia Sanchez Rao.
course.
Yeah, of course.
She's a
And I
legend.
She's a legend. And she told me the migration route for most of the Huerfano County families was Taos, Arroyo Hondo, Conejos County.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, that's my migration route. My Sandovals were an early family in Arroyo Hondo and Taos. And my Garcias and Rodriguez's, they were a Conejos County family, and my Valdez's also. They were in. It doesn't even exist anymore. Rincones or something like that. That's where they were. They were early family in the Conejos area. Yeah.
So I am kind of still trying to, I have my Romero brick wall. They ended up in Pueblo,
Mm-hmm.
and presumably they, if we follow the rest of them, like they would have come from Pueblo or to Pueblo from Huerfano. And then
Mm-hmm.
from Huerfano, they came from San Luis Valley. So I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
kind of figure out using those migrations. So how they were in like Taos or Arroyo Hondo, and then
Yeah.
they came up to the through the San Luis Valley. And how long did they kind of stay in that area before they moved over to Huerfano?
Uh, I have them, my Sandovals, as far back as they were in Taos and Arroyo Hondo in the 1820s, I would
Hmm.
say. I have my Francisco Sandoval and Maria Ignacia Chavez having kids. Of course, I have them all over. I have baptism records for some of the kids in Abitu, and then the rest of them are in the church in Rojondo and Summit House, San Cristoval, which is an area around Taos in Rojondo, just various little spots. And I don't know what I'm assuming they were running out of what you would call bottomland in those days. You couldn't. There was no. Just to have a piece of land didn't mean nothing. You had to have a sequia access to
Hmm.
do what you did. So I'm guessing it was probably getting pretty crowded down there because it was. I would say in the late 1860s is when they kind of started making the move from northern New Mexico to what today is southern Colorado,
Hmm.
and that's where I started finding them in the late 1860s in the Huerfano County area.
Okay, so they moved pretty quickly through the San Luis Valley into the Huerfano area.
Yeah, it seems like they moved for some reason. They moved around sporadically. My Archuletas, who were an early family up in the Upper Huerfano Valley, which is Red Wing and what was originally called Crestones. Uh, I originally find them in the late 1800s in Camita, New Mexico, which
Hmm.
is basically the Española area.
Wow.
And they then I found they baptized some kids in Taos. They baptized again some in Abiquiu. So I don't know what the reason was for all this movement, especially movement in that era was strictly horse and wagon. That was
Mm-hmm.
that was, but they seem to have moved around a lot. I find them in these same Archuletas in the Los Luceros uh, census in 1860. Just every 10 years, they were someplace different. I
Mm.
don't know if they didn't move, just the name of the location changed over time.
Mm. Oh, that's fun. I have my great great grandfather was in Pablo Eliras was in the 1860 Los Luceros census as
Mm-hmm.
well. He was working as a servant for mm, Valdez, some Valdezes.
Mm-hmm.
From my recollection, I think his mother was a Valdez. And so I don't know. I haven't gone back that far enough to and done all those families to kind of trace that to see. But then he joined the Civil War and then he ended up in Southern Colorado as well. So he's someone I'm trying to track down like around 1870. He ends up in what is listed in the Sacramental records as Huerfano. I still haven't identified where exactly that was because in the records you see they're either listed as Huerfano or Cucharas. And so I know where
Mm-hmm.
Cucharas is, but where was the Huerfano? Do you know that by any chance? I'm interviewing Virginia Sanchez here next week. So or this week actually. So but I've been asking around to see if anyone actually knows like, okay, where was actually like Huerfano?
I've seen some of in Karen Mitchell's Huerfano County Resources website. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen reference to Huerfano as kind of like a more of the Anglos references as kind of like a stage stop.
Hmm.
But I don't. I I do a lot of research in history. I've yet to find out where if there actually was a settlement of Huerfano. I've heard it's in the area of St. Mary's. St. Mary's was an early spot. That's where my Montoyas came from. And just from my speculation, it's kind of, how I-25 goes through and you see the Huerfano Butte there on
Mm-hmm.
the east side. That area west of there along the Huerfano River,
Mm-hmm.
there are a few little settlements, and one of them was St. Mary's. And
Mm.
I think Huerfano was kind of St. Mary's was kind of a spin-off of Huerfano. Again, speculation, but as
Okay.
far as there being a settlement of Huerfano, I really don't think there was.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just visited the Fort Francisco Museum and they had a map of historic Huerfano County. And so
Mm-hmm.
there were a couple places on there that said like one was called like Huerfano Junction, which is maybe where the stage stopped that you were referring
I
to.
That's what I am referring to. Yes.
Mhm. And then there was another one that was called Huerfano something else. So I still
Mm-hmm.
haven't quite identified. It certainly would make sense that they would be on the river.
Yes.
So that's where my great grandmother was born in 1880.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Marcus?
Yeah, Marcus. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's has some Alita relatives here in the Avondale area. Is that the same Alitas?
It could be. We ran into each other in Salt Creek.
Yeah.
He had some family in Salt Creek as well, and he pointed me to the right direction when those records
Okay.
moved from St. Patrick's to the Mount Carmel, which was really
Yeah.
helpful. I just got to go visit Mount Carmel. It was really, really wonderful. And I know that Pablo Ilira's, who I can't find him in 1870, he's the one who then had my great grandmother in Huerfano in 1880. But
Mm-hmm.
before that, after the Civil War, he had abandoned his family and left them in Conejos
Mm-hmm.
and was just, I think, bopping around after the Civil War. And he, in his pension records, he listed that he was run over by a wagon
Wow.
30 miles east of Pueblo, which I believe would have been like Avondale or
Yeah.
the Audubys Ranch. So maybe he was working for Charles Audubys, I don't
Hmm.
know. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, possibly there's a connection there.
Mhm.
So what were your family doing in that area?
Uh, in the Huerfano County area,
Were they sheep folks or
yes, sheep folks. Every time I would look through a census, well, first census I think is 1865, if I'm not sure. It showed my great grandmother, Juana Sandoval. It would show her the census. She was a housekeeper. A lot of census said housekeeper. She was living with a man named Edward Knott, Knott,
hmm.
and I think Edward Knott adopted Pablo because it said Pablo Knott. It would say herding sheep. That's what he wasn't. He wasn't in the household. He was always herding sheep. And geez, he would have been 12, 14, but he was never home. He was always herding sheep. That's all it ever said in the census. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so maybe because I always wonder how did they choose these places to settle, and I would imagine that they were sort of maybe grazing up into Colorado and kind of were scoping out some really good places to settle that way.
Yeah, a lot of getting back to Patricia Sanchez Rao. What she told me is you probably didn't, you weren't going to find your ancestors in Colorado uh, around 1860. That it was too dangerous because of the
Mm,
the Native Americans. Uh, so I think after Fort Garland was established, things kind of started maybe getting more settled down more, and that's when people started coming in. Because I was it was
interesting.
a, yeah, it was a big search looking for my Pablo, and come to find out my surname is Sandoval, but it was always rumored that Pablo. I knew I got my Sandoval surname from a female.
Hmm.
Pablo's mother was Juana Maria Sandoval. She was born in Taos. In fact, she was baptized by Padre Martinez, the famous
Mm.
Padre Martinez. I found that on her baptism record. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
And
I just found out I just for some reason just realized that my great great grandfather Mauricio Sanchez was baptized by Father Martinez as well in
yeah.
Taos. It's pretty cool. Little are pretty amazing.
Mhm. Then I started. I've been into DNA for. I'm far from an expert at DNA, but I know a little bit. So I tested myself and did the started off with the Y37 and the Y111 and the big Y700 and joined some of the DNA projects. Uh, my swab came back Martinez. I'm actually a Martinez. I'm not a Sandoval, but I knew
Wow.
that because I carried my surname from Juana Maria Sandoval, and I got involved with Miguel and Daria from the NMGS project and joined that in project. And of course, I have no paper trails to my Martinez because
Mm.
Pablo Sandoval's mother was Sandoval, and so yeah, and I've done my DNA. My maternal line, my mom's haplogroup is A2V1B, which is like I think 85% of us, your male line will go back to a European male. Your maternal line will go back to a Native American female.
Hmm.
I fit that, so that's the case. And I also tested an Archuleta cousin of mine. My dad's mom was an Archuleta. They're the ones that settled early up in Crestones. They came from Chamita, New Mexico, and I was hitting brick walls in the late 1700s with that Archuleta line. And so I tested my cousin, a male Archuleta, and joined that project. And lo and behold, his Y DNA matches. We're starting to get, it's speculation, but no one has ever had a solid paper trail back to Asensio Archuleta, who was one of the men who came with Juan de Oñate in 1598. And some other people have tested, and it's looking like, with the Y DNA evidence, that this line is a direct line to Asensio Archuleta. So I'm excited about that. And Daria validated my Archuleta lineage back to, I want to say, about 1700. So I'm happy about that.
So what was the record for your Sandoval maternal ancestor? There was no father listed, or you weren't able to identify the father?
That no, we don't know who Pablo's. That's would be my paternal. Yeah, I have my Sandovals back to the late 70, but not we. Pablo Sandoval is complete. Pablo's father is completely unknown. Yeah.
And there's no way, is there a way to using your matches, your Martinez matches, is there a way to kind of figure it out, or is it too far?
There's a lady, she's from Alamosa. She actually lives in Saudi Arabia now, and she's helped me with it because her uncle was a close YDNA match of mine, who is a Martinez, and she's narrowed it down through autosomal DNA and through YDNA. Uh, who's She speculates who may be the father of Pablo, but we don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe they'll, it feels like this technology is changing all the time.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
whatever brick walls we have or whatever that seem really hopeless, I more and more feel hopeful that one day those will be solved.
Yeah. Yep.
So your Pablo was herding sheep. Do you know what your
Yes.
other families were doing in the Huerfano area?
Pablo Sandoval married Maria Tomasa Vigil. Her father came from Arroyo Hondo also.
Mm.
And some other relatives of mine sent me, I never knew about this. It was an article from 1954, the Pueblo chieftain. And the article interviews a couple of his grandkids, Max Vigil. I forgot the other one's name, but the article in the Pueblo Chieftain says that his name was Juan de Jesus Vigil. He had the biggest sheep operation in southern Colorado. My Archuletas were more like, I would say they were more, well, everybody started out with sheep, but they evolved into cattle ranchers and cowboys. They were really good horsemen. My Archuletas were. They were known for working on all the ranches there in the Upper Huerfano and up on the Greenhorn, the Bar H Ranch, and quite the horsemen from what I've heard. They broke horses, and that's what they were into. My Montoyas, who lived in Badito, which became St. Mary's, they were farmers. And then in the early 1900s or late 1800s, when coal came, they were coal miners. My Sandovals became coal miners. All my grandfather and all his brothers worked in all the coal mines around there. My Montoya's grandfather, he was a blacksmith in Turner Mine in Encarnacion. Montoya was his name. And yeah, both my parents were brought up in the coal camps.
Oh,
My
really?
Yeah, my mom was brought up in Turner Camp, and my dad in Cameron Coal Camp. Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. So that I know in the episode with Sandy, she was kind of explaining the various factors that led to kind of the demise of the sheep industry and a lot of those sheep folks were sort of edged out of that and kind of
Yeah.
had to just find other sources of income or other industries or and coal was or the mining was.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, a lot of immigrants came to Huerfano County because of the coal mines.
Mhm.
I guess you would say our ancestors, the coal came to them. They found coal. They really did. They really didn't. I never understood if my great grandpa Encarnacion, I wouldn't think they lived in a coal camp because they had property there around St. Mary's. They're in Badito. So I wouldn't think they lived in a coal camp. I think my Sandovals lived in the coal camp in Cameron, but
Yeah,
that's
because
okay.
so I have a new question that I've asked is when they did come up through the San Luis Valley and move into the Huerfano area, were what was the land ownership situation? Was it homesteading? Was it land permission from the land grantees? How were they when they kind of came, you had multiple families who were coming to settle this area. Did they own the land? Did they each have a piece of the land? Was it common? Were they squatting?
It was common. I know this for sure about my Archuletas up in the area called Mosco Pass. It's beautiful. It's just mountains and pasture. It was communal land.
Mm.
Everybody grazed their sheep communally. Is is my understanding. I think that was the same case for most of them. When they first got there, it was communal land, and then as the Anglo encroached, fencing and all that happened, and I think that's the coal mining was probably a blessing to them because that was another income, because they didn't have the land for the sheep anymore. I would assume.
Yeah. Was there a process by which they had a piece of land where they had their home and maybe their livestock or grew a few crops or whatever, and then they lost that land or
Yeah,
'cause it-
getting back to Juan de Jesus Vigil in that article from 1954, he leased 5,000 acres of
mm.
that land on the Spanish Peaks from CFNI.
Oh.
Besides his land, he leased 5,000 acres from CFNI. And he passed away in 1912. So this would have had to have been in the early 1800s, early 1900s, because like I said, he passed away by 1912.
Mm. Okay. So maybe they were able to stay in their homes. They just went to go work at the coal mines.
Yeah, and like I said, Juan de Jesus was a pretty wealthy man. He owned properties in Walsenburg, and it seems I don't know if this was the custom of Hispanos. Seems like the oldest male ended up with everything. Because in Juan de Jesus Vigil, Max Vigil ended up with everything. And I saw his will. I think Virginia posted his will on Facebook.
Oh, cool.
And my great grandmother, Tomasa Vigil, ended up with some property in Walsburg, a home in Walsburg. And all the kids ended up with something, but
Mm.
the firstborn male seemed to end up with everything and kind of dole everything out.
Yeah, that happened with my Pachecos. The um our my great grandfather passed away in the flu epidemic and had a massive ranching operation, and it all went to the eldest son,
Yes,
and then he gambled it away and lost it.
that was probably pretty
So,
common.
because he was like in a early 20s. I mean, I'm sure he had no idea what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But then his mother and the remaining seven children, I believe, just had to share a little home in Clayton that they had. So, yeah, I guess that was a common thing.
Yeah.
Um, so when you went through that suitcase of photos with your mother, did she sort of know all this history, or did you have to kind of do that work yourself later on as an adult?
As far as the legwork, I didn't really. Social media helped me with all that. back in their day, they had to go through church records and all that. But you see it, you put out a query in any of the New Mexico Facebook groups. I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. Boom,
Hmm.
somebody shares that line. And it's just, we're blessed with our modern way we do it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So was your mom familiar with, it sounds like she was very tied into her family history and sharing the heritage. Did she know at least like, was it just her kind of more immediate family, or did she know going back, like to share with you, here's where we come from, kind of a thing?
More her immediate family. My mom uh, was raised by her grandparents. And getting back to skeletons in closets, my mom's was actually, her father was a Vallejos, who was her family she descends from Miguel Antonio Vallejos and Maria Paula Martin, who are in Virginia's Cuchareño books. And Miguel Antonio Vallejos was a very prominent man, and he was one of him and his brother were early founders in Cucharas, and they, like I said, they were a very prominent family. And through it wasn't speculated who her father was, but later I did my autosomal DNA, and her closest DNA matches are Vallejos, so there's no doubt that that's her father. Plus, her father tried to have contact with her over the years, but the grandparents who raised her, her Montoya grandparents that raised her, wouldn't allow any contact. And when she grew up and moved to Pueblo, I guess he came and he saw. I never met him, but some of my older siblings met him, and he tried, but you know how I guess her grandparents tried to turn her against having any contact with him, and she went along with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a little bit of that too.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so did you, when you were growing up,
Yes.
were both of your parents Hispano?
Oh, yes. Well,
Okay.
both my parents, 100% back to Oñate de Vargas, Hayes Hurtado. So 100% Nuevo Mexicano.
So did you grow up speaking Spanish?
No, I didn't. No,
Mm.
not at all. You've heard the stories about they didn't want to speak in Spanish in school and all that. Some of my older siblings uh, somewhat know Spanish, and we spent a lot of weekends. My mom's mom had a they had a big ranch south of Walsburg. We spent all our weekends up there as kids. We would drive to
Mm.
Pueblo and drive from Pueblo to the ranch and stay up there. And lucky to grow up in those customs. For Easter, we would butcher a cabrito, a baby goat, and butcher pigs. And I got to see my grandma. She knew how to make lye soap out of the pig and stuff like that, and the blood sausage and all those customs. And I got to on my dad's side of the family, some of his relatives had property up Ideal Road, uh, south of Walsburg, and they had a morada there.
Ooh.
And I remember as a child, I guess on the last day of Passover, I'm not sure what the custom was during Lent, they would have a feast. We'd go to the morada, and after the penitentes were done, and joining the feast and all that stuff. So that was a tradition I was lucky to grow up in, but never picked up Spanish, unfortunately.
Wow, you're so lucky to have those experiences.
Yes,
So when you were pretty little at that time, what was your, how did you process what was happening with the penitentes?
I didn't have any idea what that was all about. I remember it was kind of scary to me when my
Yeah,
parents
I
would
bet it,
explain it.
yeah.
Yeah, I I don't know if it's true. You've heard about the self-flagellation and all that kind of stuff, and that stuff kind of, we weren't around, you weren't allowed to be around that stuff, but I
Mm,
learned that's what went on during that and stuff like that.
mm.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long did they have that ranch?
I think they still have it. This would have been in the mid to early 70s when we would go that morada.
Wow. So was there at the ranch, was there like an original, like the Adobe home still that they were still using or?
Yes, there was a Adobe home there. I don't think they lived in Walsenburg, but they weren't
Mm.
living there at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah,
So they're just some remnants of what was used to be there.
yes. Hmm.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, I still need to do a little bit of editing, but my next episode should be on the reason why most of this generation don't speak Spanish
Hmm.
and the different factors that went into that. Because
Yeah,
that's always been fascinating to me that, you just have generation after generation of Spanish as your primary language, and then suddenly it's just like gone.
yeah. I don't know if you're on social. I'm on TikTok. I've actually done some TikTok videos, made some
Wow.
TikTok videos. It's a big thing nowadays, due to a lot of recent immigration for people, folks from Mexico. They call us pochos and stuff like that. You know, younger people, younger Hispanics that don't speak Spanish. They're kind of looked down on. But I regret not knowing Spanish and wish I did. But they look at it as shame. But I also, you got to think, we really don't have any particular ties to modern day Mexico. Our we've been here for over 400 years on all my side, all my lineage, and I don't. It's almost understandable that we don't speak Spanish.
Well, ours was kind of like a very different dialect, it sounds like that
Yes, yes,
because we were kind of isolated for 400 years.
yes.
Um, so when you were growing up, um did your parents use like any kind of folk remedies if you got sick, or what kind of food did you guys eat? Was it kind of more of a traditional Hispano food?
Yes, I would say so. We were raised on my. I remember every Sunday night, our little chore was to clean beans. Me and my little brother and my mom, she throw beans on the table, and we'd go through picking rocks out of the beans, and the just the disfigured beans, and yeah, every Sunday night she would get a pot of beans going for to last us the week, and then she would. Our staple was fried potatoes, fideo, fresh tortillas every day. Come home from school and have tortilla and butter, or tortilla and peanut butter.
Flour
And
tortillas?
oh yes, I always flour tortillas. And we would my dad, we're still today, we're avid hunters. We ate a lot of deer meat, elk meat. My dad loved rabbit hunting. We would always have cottontail rabbits and stuff like that. My mom made this, I still remember this, rabbit gravy over fried potatoes. And yeah, my mom was a heck of a cook. She would her green chili, everybody raved over. Uh, green chili with pork, green chili with hamburger, red chili. Our normal tradition for Thanksgiving was red chili with pork, no gravy. And yeah, and Sundays were more of a, I would say, a traditional Anglo dinner. Usually Sundays, my mom would make a meatloaf or some fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and gravy and stuff like that. That was our traditional Sunday dinner. And but yeah, all week it was beans, potatoes, fideo, for meat, pork chops, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just telling my dad. about my mom worked on Monday nights. And so that was the one night a week that he had to fix dinner for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we called it Dad's meal because it was the same thing every time. And it was
Yeah.
pork chops, fried potatoes, and
Yeah.
like canned corn or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was really delicious, but then kind of learning then later, much later as an adult, that that was probably the food that he grew up with,
Yes.
and that's why he knew how to make it.
Yep. And now modern days with we know a lot about nutrition and geez, I try to stay away from the refried beans because my mom would save the bacon grease for the refried beans. And I stood away from all that for years. But still, man, I still love my refried beans as bacon grease and cheese over them and all that kind of good stuff. Yep.
Hmm. Yep. Every night before bedtime, my dad would put a tortilla on the burner. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Yeah.
associate that smell of like kind of a slightly burned tortilla with
Yep. Exactly.
bedtime with a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of butter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So did your family ever use any kind of like um native plants or anything in the area to when you were sick, or did you just kind of have more of a traditional Vicks and that kind of thing?
No, we have, of course, Vicks, but we use osha a lot. My
Hmm.
mom, I always remember the smell of osha around the house. And we used to go in Walsenburg, we would go picking kota. My grandma called it kota tea. I think what it is, terracotta. It's a yellow flower.
Hmm.
My grandma made that tea a lot. And I could tell you a really interesting story about osha.
Yeah, please.
Uh, my brother lives south of Pueblo here, and him and his granddaughter were out in their hot tub uh, one night, and he got bit by a rattlesnake in the dark.
Oof. Oof.
And of course, he went to the emergency room here in Pueblo, and they gave him the anti venom stuff and all that stuff, and all that. And his legs, your leg, his ankle or legs swelled up like a balloon, and the doctors couldn't get to go down. They didn't know what to do. He came to the house and got some osha from my mom, made a tea out of it, or a poultice or whatever you want to call it, and put it on his leg. And the next morning, his leg was gone. All swelling was down, and that was just remarkable.
Wow. So did she actually collect the root, or you could get the root at like a store or something though?
Yeah, being so young, I don't remember where she got the root. She was My mom was blind. My mom had glaucoma,
Hmm.
so both my parents were blind.
Oh,
My dad was real bad diabetic, so I guess she probably just got it at a local store or relatives gave it to her or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, there was a little store I got the first time I got some, there was a little store in Salt Creek where I got some. But
Yeah, the Flores market, I think.
yeah. Is it
Mhm.
still open? I was asking about it when I was just there.
I'm not sure if it is. No,
Yeah. Whoever I was asking thought it had closed down, but
yeah.
so I was desperate earlier this year. I just got every month I was just getting sick, just terribly sick. And after not having been sick, for 4 or 5 years during COVID and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And so I was desperate for some
Mhm.
osha and couldn't find it because I was looking at like here we have more like Mexican stores, and I
Mhm.
don't know that it's used in like Mexico. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh.
So finally I found some at Sprouts. They had like a they had like a little dropper of, I guess,
Mhm.
like very distilled down. And so
Yeah.
then I had to put it into it tastes god awful. Um so I don't know if that's as effective, but that's the only way I was able to find it. But I should stock up on my root now so that when
Yeah.
I do get sick, then I already have it.
Yeah. And up there in the me and my brothers went in on we own a little property up there in the upper Huerfano in a little settlement called Chama. Red Wings on one side of the river and Chama's on the other side of the Huerfano River. And there's actually the people who lived there before us planted osha.
Hmm.
So if we ever get together, I have lots of osha.
Oh, wow. Well, when
Yeah,
so do you have to dig up to get the root? You have to dig
yeah.
up the whole plant each time and then maybe just plant it each year?
No, no, because it in the spring when it comes up, it flowers. There's flowers all over, and I guess it replants itself. Because
Mm.
I read you're supposed to wait till after the first freeze to dig up the root, because that's when I guess the nutrients leave the plant and go into the root after the first frost.
Mm. Okay.
So
Yeah,
that's what
that
I
makes
do.
sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's good to know. So maybe I should just grow my own.
It's not that easy. I've heard people have tried to, and right there where it's growing in our yard there in Chama, it's next to the drainage ditch. So I guess that's why it does so well there.
Yeah, it's like milkweed. You know, it's something that grows in any old drainage area or on the side of the road naturally. But if you try
Yeah,
to like grow it yourself by seed or whatever, it's really, really, really hard to grow.
exactly. That's what I've heard. Yep.
Yeah, they're really finicky.
Hmm.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I've heard of the Kota tea. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember what the equivalent of that would be.
What is
Um,
it? Chamomile? I wonder. It's something.
That's what I was just gonna ask is my first thought was chamomile, but
Hmm.
I didn't want to. I pull a lot of things out of the air on this
Yeah.
program.
That's what I'm doing too. And I do know, but as far as me and you face to face, it's not coming to me. But I think
Yeah.
it's chamomile. Yeah.
So what else kind of from your childhood do you feel like was a really unique kind of Hispano experience?
Mm. Like I said,
What?
I thought that was neat the way my grandmother made or knew how to make the lye soap from the butchered pig from the fat of the pig, and she made dish soap. And she would put there was a rose fragrance she would put in it.
Oh, wow.
The soap was a lot like simple ivory soap. That's basically what it was, but it had a nice rose fragrance to it. And growing up, we my dad was into horses. We had horses. We went riding every weekend, and we getting back to the hunting. We learned to pack in back to the wilderness on our horses, and I don't know if that's Hispano, but I guess it would be old school or whatever. Or yeah,
What did you guys do for Christmas? Did you have any Christmas traditions?
I think getting back to our traditions, we didn't have much of a Christmas. Our big Christmas was Christmas Eve.
Mm.
We have kind of a dinner on Christmas Day, but tamales and green chili was the big thing. We'd get together for Christmas Eve. All me and I have five siblings. Uh, except Christmas Eve was our big Christmas. We'd even open presents on Christmas Eve. So Christmas morning and Christmas Day wasn't really the big tradition for us growing up.
And did you go to church on Christmas Eve?
No, my older siblings and my parents they all had their first Holy Communion and all that, but me and my brother came around 10. They had their first three children, and me and my brother were born 10 years later. And my mom was in her 40s when she had me, and 42 when she had my brother. And I guess they were worn out. No, we didn't go to church, but my parents and the older siblings, they all were in Catholicism.
Yeah, that's the story of my life. My parents had their adopted 2 kids. They couldn't have kids when they got married. They adopted 2. And then
Mm.
10 years later,
Yep.
suddenly they could get pregnant, and they had my brother and I in their 40s as well. So,
Exactly. Yep.
and
I'm the
yes,
same
and
situation.
yes, they were very worn out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I got a bit of a head start on the whole genealogy thing. Most people
Mm-hmm.
wait until they kind of retire, I think. But
Yeah.
I think I've always kind of been interested in family history, even from a very young age. So,
Mm-hmm.
but then I am the baby, so I do miss that I missed out on like older aunts and uncles and grandparents and all that kind of stuff that I could have asked questions, but I'm just too
Mm-hmm.
young for that.
But
But it was so great to meet you. I've been seeing your name and hearing your
oh,
name for years, so it's great to finally meet you. All right, great. All right, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to Luminaria. You can reach me at luminariapod@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is of Varsoviana, performed by Nieves Anaya and his daughter Ernestina Anaya at Arroyo Hondo, New Mexico in 1940. It's part of the Juan Bautista Rael collection at the Library of Congress.